for bringing us here. This is a place we appreciate very much. Enjoyed meeting some of you yesterday and look forward to meeting more of you today. And I hope that we, the committee, can be of some value to you, and the board can be of some value to you. I thought what I would do for the next few minutes is give a series of episodes that relate to aspects of interdisciplinarity that I have experienced and been involved with that may therefore help put in some context paths you might want to take, paths you almost certainly don't want to take, and set a context for proceeding from here. Let me start, as I almost always do in my American political science courses, with the founding. This is not one of the United States. This is not one of the things that I was directly involved in. I'm old, but I'm not that old. This is in 1787. One of our founders was John Adams. He wasn't at the Constitutional Convention because he was here in Europe, he was in England for the most part, and came back and decided that what he wanted to do was bring back some ideas he had gathered here and established, among other things, the American Academy for the Arts and Sciences. This is sort of an end of Enlightenment era idea that if you could just gather enough people in the same room, gather enough books in your library, you would have all of knowledge all together as one large piece. And this is an end of an Enlightenment, and did not need disciplines were not a part of this notion. It was just a notion that people could be a Da Vinci and Erasmus and know a little bit about everything, and know a lot about everything, and in general have a full set of knowledge to proceed to solve various problems that they're facing. One other thing that he, in setting up this American Academy of Arts and Sciences, he wrote an essay in which he lamented the state of what we now call the natural sciences, and said how far behind in their intellectual development they were compared to the social sciences. As a social scientist, I always liked that passage, but it, like so many things, as soon as you say it, the world changes on you, and the 19th century obviously saw a great expansion of knowledge in the sciences, and the creation of increasing technical facility needed to generate new knowledge. This was set up now, going to episode 2, which is towards the end of the 19th century. In the United States, we were having our Industrial Revolution really taking off. And these two, the development of, especially the sciences, I think chemistry, mostly because my wife is a chemistry major and graduate, developed increasing great progress with an increasing demands that required a narrowing of focus to be able to achieve all that you could achieve, combined with what was happening in the Industrial Revolution, which was specialization and division of labor. These came together at the end of the 19th century in the United States, and a crystallization occurred. Not only was there the creation of the disciplines, but there was the creation of the organizations. The American Political Science Association, for example, of which I also happen to be president of that. So I know a little bit about its history. It has a 1903 date. many of the disciplines in the United States have an 1890 or 1900 date as their founding. So we had gone from one large, undifferentiated set of knowledge to differentiation into subfields, but then we had a crystallization that drew borders around these disciplines and said, these are really useful for solving collective knowledge problems within, say, political science, economics, sociology, what have you. But inherently began to create the process of closing off the ability to break across the disciplines. And so the problem of disciplinarity as separating knowledge into discrete parts and institutionalizing them, not just organizing them, but actually institutionalizing them with all of their sets of journals that establish how well you're succeeding as a scholar and so forth, happened about then. The first efforts at interdisciplinarity in the United States happened about 5 years later. And the reason is that we divide the knowledge in one way. We have a specialization, division of labor. We may say that it's absolutely inherent. No person can be totally on top of every bit of knowledge, of course. So we need to have some kind of specialization, division of labor. But the problems we want to solve may or may not align with those divisions. This would be true with any way we had divided things. Right? The division cuts across the sphere of knowledge into discrete chunks. Sometimes it works extremely well, sometimes not. So, for example, when I was a graduate student, or now getting to where I actually entered into this, when I was a graduate student, my department rested on two centrally important scholars. Professor Fenno was the undoubted, totally accepted as the leading scholar of the American government, American Congress. His problem that he wanted to study and solve aspects of fits within the boundaries of political science just sort of naturally. The other person, Professor William Riker, his problem cut across and was not contained entirely within political science. And so his was inherently an interdisciplinary problem, and yet he was raised within a discipline and had to struggle with how to expand the boundaries so that I could learn about the core, learn about game theory from economists. One of the ways he put the graduate students on the same floor as, in political science, on the same floor as the economics professors, and the economics graduate students on the same floor as the political scientists, so that we sort of inherently bumped into one another in this two-discipline. Now, granted, that's just a two-discipline way. After all, we had been one discipline when the disciplines first started. I think you still study political science. You don't study political science at Oxford. You study PPD, philosophy, politics, and economics as one entity. And it wasn't until the turn of the 20th century, when all these disciplines were forming, that people like Lord Marshall said, Alfred Lord Marshall said, the stuff that Pareto and so on, the great Italian political economists, just was an insoluble set of problems. It was too big and too complicated, and for Marshall, he needed to cut it down to, let's suppose there's one producer and one consumer, and let's build up from there. So he built up an economy entirely separate from the polity. And in that fashion, political science, philosophy played off, and then economics went off on its own, and PPE was left with just the middle P, politics, and that's how we became a discipline, because nobody else wanted to work with us. So Riker comes along, and he has the problem that he does need to work with others. We need to work with others, and we needed to and in particular, we needed to work with economists because we were doing problems that politics and economics, especially, coming together. If you think, if we think about it, that's the standard thing. So if you have problems, you have 3 projects. Those projects, if you can sort of imagine their definition of what knowledge is useful for them, the chances are they are in 3 or 4 or 5 disciplines, not contained within one. Sometimes you're lucky. Yesterday we talked about the survey that's going to have as one part of it, I realize it's just one part of it, the European elections. So if you think of it as a European election study, it's centrally within political science, can draw usefully from sociologists, psychologists, all the disciplines, but is centrally located within a single discipline. That's one kind of interdisciplinarity, a very weak form, where political scientists grab from everybody else. As I mentioned before, the creation of discipline, almost immediately, there were problems that needed to cut across disciplinary boundary lines. It turns out the Rockefeller Foundation, just recently established because Rockefeller was still producing stuff, Standard Oil at this point. Its decision of how to spend the money was to try to help cities, and it happened to pick Pittsburgh, my hometown. Pittsburgh as the setting for the study of immigrant populations coming in. We had the Industrial Revolution, we had United States Steel in Pittsburgh, and so on. And so we had problems of how to make a workable city with very high immigration. That turned out to be, you couldn't study that just with political science or just with economics or just with sociology or whatever. It required an interdisciplinary approach. So almost immediately upon the creation of disciplines, there was large sums of money made available for interdisciplinary research. And they never got beyond the study of Pittsburgh, which is fine by me. I was born there, but it didn't solve the problem. One final observation about it, or 2 final observations about interdisciplinarity. Duke University was a very fine Southern university, not too long before the time I got there. Its president decided it was time to try to become a national or even international university of standing. And the problem is, how do you do that when you have Harvard that was founded in the 1600s, blah, blah, and so forth. Ours was founded in the 1920s, mid-1920s, the first graduate was in the 1930s, so it was a pretty young university. And the idea was, we will progress by doing interdisciplinarity right. Turned out, right was sort of right, but sort of wrong. The decision was made to provide a substantial sum of money to establish 7 different interdisciplinary units, of which I was asked to start one. And we were to be considered on the same plane administratively as deans. here, but that's a dean of social science, a dean of maybe a dean of arts and sciences would be there. And we were supposed to be able to meet with them as equals. And there were a variety of scientific-based interdisciplinary units, ones that cut across, and then ethics that cut across all units and so on. The brilliant idea, it actually did boost Duke's reputation within the country, hopefully within the world, quite a bit. But that was not a long-term solution because there was never a basis by which centrally funding could be achieved. It was only possible as long as the university administration was willing to fund us to create these university institutes. We were not able to have the same basis for success that departments and colleges within our university were able to do, headed by deans. And you are doing one of the things that will help ameliorate that problem. The basis of most of our deans' funding is tuition, students that you attract. The interdisciplinary units were for a long time not allowed to give degrees. Therefore, we couldn't get the steady source of funding that departments and colleges could. At some point, even 5 million euros runs out. It's time. You can't guarantee that you're going to always be able to have external funding from large grants. And so if you're building an interdisciplinary unit, that's one of the things to keep in mind. Finally, on the way over, we were in the bus. We were talking about transdisciplinarity and interdisciplinarity. Turns out there's different meanings in Europe and the United States. Let me give you the United States meaning. Interdisciplinarity is rooted in the disciplines, bringing two or more together. That's what we think of as interdisciplinarity. Transdisciplinarity is cut across with no disciplinary foundations underneath it. Drawing from the disciplines, but not being of the disciplines coalesced together. Those are the two different viewpoints you could have, two different ways of producing knowledge, but more so, not only producing knowledge, but having an understanding of what would be long-term survival for assistant professors entering in, for first-year students coming in to learn and develop a major or concentration in a transdisciplinary or an interdisciplinary unit. You have made a choice that it's interdisciplinarity in my understanding of it. And you have the advantage of being a department and able to train students and be degree granting, and I think that's a possibility, at least in the American setting, that would be a possible way of moving forward. I would like to stop at this point because I'm now up to date with the experiences that I've had and the observations that I've had, and I'd be happy to take any questions or comments or discussion.